Hello, everyone. Welcome to the live stream. We are now kicking off week 7 of Vardia with the theme Obituary Island, where we think about islands and death. And in first of our roundtables, we are having Isaac Michan. Isaac Michan is an architect um, and educator based in Mexico City. He received his Master of Science in Architecture from Pratt Institute and his Bachelor in Architecture and Urbanism from Universidad Iberoamericana with studies at RMIT. In 2010, he founded Michan Architecture. The work of the practice has been internationally published and widely exhibited. Nowadays, he combines his professional practice with teaching at Universidad Anahuac in Mexico City and has taught at Universidad Iberoamericana and the AA Visiting School in Mexico City. And with that, I would like to pass it over to Isaac. Isaac, thank you very much for being with us today.
Hi, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here and share some ideas with you. Let me share the screen for presentation. Wait a second. Can you see the screen? The screen now?
Yes, we can see.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So first, let me start with the questions that you have all asked to all the participants. Why does the Bienal exist? What does the Bienal do? And for whom does the Bienal exist? I think the three questions relate very much to each other, but let me start with the first one. I think it exists for sharing disciplinary knowledge and ideas. And I could say that today is totally different than before. Before, when there was no fast communication, you could see what was going on every 2 years at a Bienal. And today, even though we have this fast communication, we still have the romantic notion of what a Bienal is. So I think still the best work, or kind of the best work, is displayed here. Then what does the Bienal do? For me, it's a platform to sharing disciplinary knowledge that doesn't have to be strictly build work per se. It could be ideas, models, concepts, and way of how we look at architecture and the world. And the last question, for whom does the Bienal exist? I would argue that it's a place, a platform for architects by architects. And I don't conceive that the wrong way. I think it is important sometimes to close ourselves as a practice and talk about what is at stake in the discipline and see what are we doing around the world in different contexts, countries. But I also think that we should also kind of maintain ourselves open to learn from new practices and disciplines. And I think today it's a bit difficult to find a common ground where we can see all the discipline and kind of tag it in one place. But I want to argue that today we can have these two kind of categories: contingency and autonomy within the discipline. I will explain them in a bit. For me, contingency is an architecture that is completely reliant on external aspects of the world. Its agenda depends on external disciplines, and it grabs from external trends, fashion, disciplines, or whatever it can grab from. And the architecture that is shaped from this criteria becomes very malleable and weak. As the main agenda is outside our fields, a project is argued based on the number of solar panels it is used to incorporate the building, or based on the amount of greenery to call it sustainable, or the script and software we use to model a certain facade. So the main agenda of this type of architecture becomes something outside of our field, and we usually call it, I don't know, sustainability, social agenda, parametricism, or digital fabrication, and so on, and many different categories. And in a way, for me, when we happen to describe architecture with this category, there is no room left to judge architecture based on its own qualities, based on its internal qualities. So the practice loses a bit of agency. Then we have the autonomy, and you can imagine it's completely the opposite. It's something that relies on its own intrinsic agenda that replies to the history of the discipline. So it's an architecture for architects by architects. We have all this history of Palladio and Villa Rotonda or Boulez or Eisenman. So it's an architecture that only relies on internal dialogue and logic. And for me, I think architecture should strive for an autonomy project, but it's almost impossible to produce autonomy because we are surrounded in a context and in a world, and we need to be contingent to external logics. So, having said these two categories, I would argue that the goal of my practice is to create a crossbreed between these two worlds and negotiate them in order to gain agency and maintain internal ambition. Um, I think what architecture can do best, apart from all the social good, sustainability, and so on, which I'm not against it, but I just think it should be one of its components, like structural engineering, rather than its main agenda. I think what it can do best, architecture, is to be aware of ourselves in the world that we live in. It should make us more surprised and intrigued of our own surrounding. Um, how can we do this? My first approach in my practice was to produce a tabula rasa approach where we would make something completely different, super alien architecture to the current world. And after several attempts, we realized that it was not the way for us, as this architecture was becoming something very iconic and part of the society of spectacle and capital market and so on, and it was becoming something too easy to digest. So we kind of put this analogy of these two movies. The first one on the left is Star Trek, and the second one is Blade Runner. The argument of these two movies is that the first one, Star Trek, which could be any futuristic movie, uh, it's something completely detached from what we know of the current world. And because of that, it's a bit hard to relate to that. The future vision of this futuristic movie, the Star Trek, it's something that you cannot relate anything because you don't know anything. Everything is new and alien. Versus Blade Runner, which we are more interested in producing this type of scenario or reality. It's a clash of high and low resolution. You have these super new gadgets and high digital things going on in the movie, but you also have the low resolution. You still have a car, buildings still have doors, windows, and so on. But this intersection between these two things is, I think, what is more interesting and what is happening today, rather than proposing something completely new and different. So we're at a point that rather than proposing a tabula rasa project when we turn everything off and we put one thing with one solution and one reading, we want to produce something strange that it's we accept some part of the buildings but we propose new ones. So there's this interaction of normal versus a bit surprising things. So these examples for us are very handful of exquisite corpse. For instance, uh, André Breton exquisite corpse with his Dada friends, where he starts a drawing and then another one continues it and another one, and then the result is something unexpected, something weirder, but at the same time related to the world. Or, for instance, Piranesi Campo Marcio, where you could see that different parts that have no relation between them are put together in a plan, and they kind of speak again as a new whole, towards a new coherence. Or these ready-mades by Duchamp, which I think this really changed the way everybody started to look at art and architecture, where you could just take out the context of something completely normal and banal, and when you put it out in these different contexts, it becomes something else. It has a new meaning, a new reading. So we're really interested in that, in taking kind of everyday things and then produce them with new meanings and new readings. These are some miscellaneous images that we have produced in our studios, and I want to describe them a bit. We want to glitch reality and produce things that are in the limit between the familiar and the unfamiliar, with ambiguous qualities to create multiple readings into the users. Things don't have to have one limited view. So we're a place where we accept some parts of the everyday buildings, pipes, doors, and so on, but others we don't, and we push them as far as we can to produce uncanny result, where you could see something completely normal, but when you look at it twice, you realize that there is something intrinsic in relation to the world. Now, really quick, I'm gonna explain three projects of my practice. Hopefully, the work relates to what we just talked. The first one is a building of social housing, CZ53, with Grupo Nodus. This building is located in Mexico City. It's an apartment building, 42 units apartment. This is the area. It's located here. It's in a mid density area where you have all surrounded by brick buildings, and the density was pretty high. It was leaving 20% free of the space. So we decided to create a three tower scheme with two patios that are connected with a bridge, and you have units facing the street. Then the other units are facing internal courtyards. And the ambition of this project was to produce a very dense and limited building with small unit apartments, but to play a bit with the structure of the building. The structure had to be brick because of its cost, brick with concrete reinforcement and steel rebar, and we wanted to leave it exposed. So we started playing with arrangements of the brick to test it and see what it could produce. And at the end, we played a bit with the facade of the structure. So it's a facade that is constantly changing when the light hits the bricks. And it's a bit what I explained. It's something completely, it blends into the site, but when you look twice, you can see some parts of the building that are kind of talking. This is interior courtyards, stairs, interior courtyard, and facade with the bricks moving. Second project is a small cafe we did recently. This project had a basic idea that wanted to create an atmosphere full of textures, really simple, but with a play of materiality. So we proposed a hanging object in the ceiling that could simulate like hanging rocks, which produce some lighting effects with cables. So it could become an intricate piece hanging from the ceiling. This is kind of the basic layout. You enter here, you have space for cafe, and here's the kitchen. So in this project, I think the most interesting part was to explore the materiality of the project, how to do the first thing with a very low resolution and low budget. We call it textile, and we started folding it and sewing it. And we also explored, here's examples of the textiles on some one-to-one mock-ups where we were testing it. Here's some images of the installation. We also became interested in this material, which is standard stucco, but we kind of wanted to glitch it. So we used a very normal technique, which is kind of combing a hair, but then we cut it the edges randomly. And why I'm showing this project, because I think the material process and the exploration process was kind of gave us a lot of clues towards what we're doing now. We also play with different textures of concrete and terrazzo, and this was the end result. And the last project, it's an apartment building as well, the Al 1310. This one is with Young and Ayara. And this is an apartment for a mid-market residential building. This is the building. It's a freestanding object from the site. The site is usually dense in the plot from two sides. This one was freestanding. So by doing that, we started to produce these windows that have a rotation. And the goal of the rotation, the idea of the rotation, is to maintain always clear views towards the street or the back, which is a green space. So what happens after is that we started playing with the connection between the slab and the rotation of the window, and we generated these ruled surfaces that connect the slab and the window, and then again the upper slab. And then we started playing with the notion of a bay window, but an inverted bay window. We also, these are the drawings of the modules. We produce 9 different modules, and then the fabrication was also quite interesting. We produce a based formwork which is wooden, and then we copied it with fiberglass to cast it's all cast in place, so everything is casted with the fiberglass. And we produce several mock-ups. This is one where you could see the ruled surface rotation, the slab, and then you have the inverted bay window. So when you're looking inside of the building, you see, when you're inside, you see the outside facade. And this one is in construction. This is some images where you could see the concrete, the pouring concrete. This is the fiberglass formwork, and this is the wooden formwork. And the last image, this is the kind of rotated bay window image of the construction where you see the slab. The slab becomes the ruled surface. Hopefully this ends up in this rendering. And this is it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're gonna open it up for questions.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah. Anybody has a question?
No questions. No questions.
We have one.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
About the scale of sustainability, because scale of human, scale of building, and scale of city. Because we are trying to design the sustainable buildings, but we are sure or not our users know how to use the building. That clear? I'm not sure.
No, can you repeat the first? Can you repeat the first part?
I'm asking to what do you think about the scale of sustainability?
Okay. Okay.
Because we are trying to design buildings for users, and we are trying to design sustainable buildings like mechanic things, light and other things. But how can we sure our users use that building like effectively? How can we teach them design on process design? I'm not complicated sentence.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I think I understand.
Yeah, I'm asking the scales of the sustainability actually.
Okay.
Human,
Okay.
building, and city. Yeah, that's the question.
Okay. I think. Sustainability, it's something very important, but it's not only, from my point of view, concerned with architecture. I think sustainability, it's related to all disciplines, and all disciplines should incorporate it. The way I see it in architecture, especially, is that it should become one of the components of the architecture. Like, you have structural engineering or plumbing in a building, you should have all the sustainable features on a building. What I disagree of sustainability is that it becomes kind of a style or a trend, and you no longer speak about architecture, and to justify the architecture, you just speak about the sustainable aspects of the building. But I think it's something necessary that we must do, and people from all the disciplines should learn it. It's not something just architecture should educate the people. Rather, everyone should incorporate these technologies.
Hi, thank you for the lecture. I have a question that relates to the authorship of the architects that you actually kind of mentioned about autonomy. So I see on a lot of your work is to deal with complex geometry and operation that actually engage with the kind of current technology. But I wonder if what is the kind of core essential kind of medium that the architecture play, that I see the current issues right now is a lot to do with object base on surface operation rather than actually come from the within. By within, I mean the experience of the space. So those have to do with like the fundamental issues like scale, light, shadows, to actually transform, like offer the new experience. So I wonder what do you think about that?
Mm, mm, I mean, I agree with you. I think the fundamentals of, well, or what we try in our practice is to create different spaces, more intriguing and exciting. But I agree, it's not only surface; it's also interiority. We explore it differently in different projects. We don't like to kind of close and say we only do surfaces or whatever. In each project, we see what we can do with the client, with the program, and with all the requirements. That's why the kind of the presentation tries to bridge these two things of contingency, where you have a budget, a client, a program, and also these internal goals that you want to push towards, I don't know, obsessions or whatever you have in your work that you still want to continue. And I think that we use softwares and technology, but that's also not the main goal. The main goal is the work by itself. I don't know if that answers that question.
I have a question about the duality that you set up with contingency and autonomy. So you claim that you want to combine these two to negotiate agency in architecture, and it was kind of clear to me like how you described that with your comments about sustainability. Like you're saying, like people focus too much on sustainability and cast architecture aside to the second tier of priorities, I guess. But you also mentioned about changing the context of familiar things. So in that duality of contingency and autonomy, do you get the familiar things from the contingency side of the duality and try to change the context using the autonomy of architecture? Or I'm not trying to understand more about your process. So maybe I should ask you, can you articulate that process a little bit more?
It's, to be completely honest, it's not totally clear. It's an idea that we are working on, and it's more of the context of describing the agency of architecture, where we kind of tend to just explain everything with external factors and then try to gain some relevance. To gain relevance, we explain everything with external factors. And what I'm trying to do is maintain these internal ambitions, which are more, the internal ambitions are more to make unfamiliar things that are in the line of something that it's kind of primitive or something that you know, but then when you look twice, that's, I think, something more in the autonomy realm, or maybe it's out of the two. You know what I mean? It's something external. But the way I'm trying to do is combining the two. I don't know if this kind of confused more the question.
That was clear.
Yeah.
I understood what you.
Hey, so it's a kind of out of topic, but I just want to ask something about the representation. So in your website, I'm seeing this some kind of built and unbuilt works, but for the unbuilt works, actually the representation, actually the final image is getting importance, maybe more than built works too. So how is your idea about the representation architecture? Is it a kind of aim or a goal for you, or it's a kind of tool to present your idea? So, because for the final image, if you talk about the build project, for the final image, these are all the quite great renderings, so more fancy and shiny things. But for the unbuilt works, it's the kind of conceptual things. So, are these the aims of the project, or is it kind of media just a tool for you?
I think it's a great question. And to me, built or unbuilt, it is still architecture and has same relevance. It's more about the concepts and ideas. So we try to explore, I mean, the way you explain a project is by its representation. You don't build by yourself the project. You give plans, models, or drawings, and then people build it. So yeah, I think representation plays a crucial role in how you explain the work. Otherwise, everything is in a model, and then no one knows about the project until you put it out there. And the way you put it out there is how you talk about the work.
Maybe to follow that question is, what do you think about the influence of teaching in your work? Because I see now in school that right at the beginning, the student get to learn a lot about the techniques of representation, and that's influenced a lot on the way we think about or do in architecture. That's I wonder, is there something that more fundamental that the advantage of technology or software right now is actually make us lose some kind of fundamental quality in architecture, like scale, proportion, composition, those kind of things. And how does that kind of relationship between the old and the new things that influence your teaching? Thank you.
I think technology, it's, for me, it's a tool. As the hand is also a tool, drawing by hand, technology is also a tool. And the way I see it, I don't think architecture loses quality. It just has different qualities and different resolutions. What you could do with drawing, like when you draw, you have some outcome with the hand. When you draw with the computer, then different things can emerge. So I still think it's the same. It's just a different tool, and then the tool gives you different feedbacks of what it can do. So I mean, for me, it's the same issues of proportion, scale, space, but you just have a different kind of tool to do this architecture.
I guess my question is more so about the way you teaching architecture, but it's also I think the reason I'm asking that because the mentality of thinking or teaching, the approach using technology or software specifically, is so different with the directness of when we use the hand drawing or those kind of knowledge about, for example, composition, scale, proportion. Those things actually detach with the thinking by software. So how does those kind of topics kind of embed in your teaching? I'm not sure if I make it clear.
I understood it. I think it's, for me, in the teaching, it's actually the same. It gives us more insight when we use digital technology, and we don't only use digital technology. We're not close only to software. We we're open to whatever the student can bring, but with digital technology, we also look at proportion, scale, everything. You have also more insights or more possibilities or different possibilities, not better or worse. It's just different outcome. Like for instance, when everything was done with hand and ruler, the outcome from modernism was everything 90 degrees, right? And you could see that that was the tool. And now that the tool is the mouse, and you have the software and so on and technologies to build, then the outcome is becoming something else. But I think the the interest and the core is the same, which is space, proportion, what you described, or that's what we try to strive for in our teaching.
It would be my last comment.
Yeah, no.
The reason
Yeah,
I'm saying that because it just reflect from my experience is there's a lot of the space that I experience today is the texture or the new technology, the medium that they play with is so new. Uh, but the feeling or the experience of the space is actually lack of the awareness of the relationship between human body and the view, and those kind of fundamental things. I think is my question is more maybe the order of how students learn about the fundamental first, and then apply those kind of new thing in additional into that. Because I aware that some of the project is actually the advantage of computational design that become losing the fundamental quality of the architecture. Because some of the project is extremely simple, but it's actually creates some kind of sensation after you experience the space. It's just my kind of personal observation.
Yeah. I think it's a bit difficult to tag all digital or new or architecture that is made with software as lacking of this proportion of space. I'm sure there is some, but I'm sure there is some that's not, just as when you do something analog without any computer, there is good and bad. But I think the same questions are at stake in both projects, and the goal is to create those qualities that you describe in anything. I think it's the same any tool that you use. I don't know if I'm explaining.
I'm also curious about the position of the limits in your social housing or this kind of low-cost housing projects, because we know that you're an awarded architect with your social housing project. So the limits, do you start designing firstly by thinking the limits, or maybe do you act freely, so then thinking about limits lately?
I guess it's everything at the same time. Like, I don't know, there's for us in the practice, there's not a straight line. Of course, you need to talk about the limits and the client and budget and program and so on. But at the same time, you think what qualities you can get and what you can gain from those constraints. So and then sometimes you go back again. It's not as if first we do what we want and then we combine it with the client. It's kind of all happening together. Also, the time to create it, it's to produce a project, it's quite short. So everything happens fast, and you don't know what started. Sometimes even the client pushes that idea or someone else.
Do we have any questions? Any other questions? I think no. Thank you for being us, Isaac.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's very nice talk with you about this.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Great question.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Right.